Warning: tuning your vehicle can be a dangerous activity, and there is substantial risk involved. The dangers include, but are not limited to, permanently damaging your vehicle, injury or death to yourself or other people, damaging personal property due to paying attention to a laptop while driving. This video is intended for educational purposes only. Before altering the calibration of your vehicle, you should verify it is in proper working and mechanical condition. Have a working basis of knowledge of how your vehicle works and how the components interrelate, and understand how your tuning software works. Bottom line, you and only you are responsible for making your own decisions, as well as accepting the consequences of those decisions. I cannot be held accountable for your actions. All right, guys, welcome back to the shop. This collection of pixels of mine I will share with you today. Today we're going to be talking about shift scheduling. In other words, when does the 6L80E shift? This is actually broken down into two parts. So we have the part throttle shift over here, and then we have the full throttle over here. If we look at the upshift, we can see that it is controlled by two things. We have the throttle position, and then we have the miles per hour. And this is going to tell us when the shift is commanded. Full throttle, we can take throttle out of the equation, but we have miles per hour, and then we also have the RPMs that will command when the shift will happen. So we'll break these down and talk about both parts. So as normal, when I go through these videos, I have the OEM tune pulled up and then I'm comparing it against mine. So all of these green cells that you see, those are ones that have edited or been changed from stock. And then if you've followed along up to this point, you know that I kind of always want to keep my transmission consistent. I don't ever want to enter a condition of, oh, am I in sport mode or tap up, tap down, and it's doing something a little bit differently. Everything's consistent, at least till the torque converter, and then we're going to talk about that in the next video. But otherwise, all the gears shifting, the pressures, time, I want to make it exactly the same. So I've basically set this normal up how I wanted it. Then I've copied it to A and B. I don't remember what I did with hot, but apparently I've changed it in the past. Tap up, tap down's a specialty thing that we're going to talk about here at the end. But let's knock out the normal part throttle shifts. So I've taken the liberty of copying this stuff out, the stock and mine, and I've put it into this spreadsheet. So here's a tab for the OEM values and then my values. And then I just graphed them out to take a look at these things. So on the left side, we can see the OEM. And there's a few things that right away jump out to me that, man, this is questionable. Like why is it set up this way? The first one is you can see we have overlapping downshift and upshift areas. Now, when you think about this, um, when you are driving, and say our current envelope, we're right here, which is, our mile, the combination of our miles per hour and throttle pedal. When you hit the gas pedal to go faster, it goes fast. It's going to shoot over to the right. Your speed will come up a little bit, but by and large, you're going to be kind of doing one of these things. And so you're going to cross a few of these boundaries. And when you have these overlaps, this is like confusion. Okay. And so this is what I call crossing the streams. And this is what you get. And what's a super common complaint of the 6L80E? It wants to shift, but it doesn't know if it wants to shift. It can't decide if it wants to shift. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It just doesn't know what it wants to do. It's kind of wishy-washy. Well, I found in one of my logs from my testing this exact scenario. And you can see this yellow line represents I'm in first gear. It says, hey, let's go to second. No, we need to go back down to first. Oh, wait, hang on. I was wrong. We need to get back into second gear. So this is the kind of stuff that you want to avoid. So when we look at this, you can see that I've clearly separated out these boundaries. Try to keep them, a nice distance between them, and certainly no overlapping. The other thing, and this is just an OCD thing, Uh, you can see if you squint really hard, this dotted line, and by the way, the dotted lines represent the downshift. This dotted line goes down. And so, probably, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that notices this. But if we look at this, we can see initially at 0% throttle, it says downshift at 4.9 miles an hour, but there on out, it drops to 4.6. I mean, granted, it's zero point 0.3 miles an hour, but this is just kind of some weird sloppy stuff that how does that stuff even creep into the factory tune? We, I mean, I expect better. Maybe not everybody has the same expectations at me, but it's a little bit off to me, I think. And then the overdrive, you can see we still have some crossing of the streams, at least on my car. Obviously, your vehicle most likely will be different from the factory calibration. But, why are these shapes? They just don't seem to really match up. And so I kind of more closely mirrored the shapes over here. Um, so the other thing that I'll talk about is the overall shape and the starting points and ending points here. So the left side, I've basically kept the factory, whatever the minimum speed is for each gear, that's something that I've kept. Even though I have kind of a rowdy cam, it still seems to do just fine. So I left that. The ending part is where we're going to connect essentially, and we're going to have continuity between part throttle and wide open throttle stuff. And we'll get to that in a second, but we're going to need to do separate testing on that. But the middle part, you see, I kind of have these nice, gentle, swooping S curves. And so for me, if you've listened to the past videos, I kind of talk about, you know, I I have two modes that I drive my car in. One is I'm in town, I'm trying to be quiet, trying to be a good citizen. It's loud exhaust. It's got a big cam. It's got a big stall. Getting off the line is a little bit of a noisy affair, right? And I'm not trying to give hot rodders a bad name. And sometimes I just want to drive and not cause a big ruckus. And that's what these S curves are. So on the left side is a really gentle, the invisible 1, 2, 3 shifts, get you going, get you moving without a whole lot of ruckus. But then as soon as you start giving it throttle, you can see that these kind of exponentially grow and they get a lot more harder to command that upshift. And so that's where you get the aggression in, which is the other side of my driving is I'm beating on this thing and I expect it to perform. So to me, this is a perfect blend of both of those worlds. And you can look over here on this particular shift, this 3-4 shift, it's pretty much a straight line. And pretty much same thing for this was this 2-3 shift as well. And I kind of went down that route of having more linear straight lines. And I didn't like it as much. So this is all also going to come into play as you dial this stuff in, and you're going to have to do this in combination with your torque management and shift timing to get what you like. But generally, once you get these speeds dialed in the way you want it, you're going to leave them alone. This isn't something that you're going to spend a lot of time tweaking on. But just get them right, and you'll be good. All right. So now let's talk about the full throttle shifts. So this is going to be something that you're definitely going to be required to do some testing on. So here's some of the testing that I did from quite a while back. Now, first of all, after I rebuilt the engine, I'm pretty sure I can get away with, say, a 7,200 RPM shift point. But I wanted to be a little bit more conservative, so I decided 6,900 RPM sounds pretty safe to me. So in these graphs, you can see I've set a reference line for 6,900 RPMs. So this is my goal. I'm looking at here and I want basically this RPM to hit that dotted line every single time. And so it goes without saying, at this point, you're going to have the rest of your tune dialed in. Your timing, your fuel, like you need a safe tune, something you can count on before you start beating on this thing at wide open throttle, start optimizing your shift points. So get that taken care of and then decide on your shift point. We'll talk about optimum shift points here in a few minutes. But at this point, you can see like this shift, right? Our 2-3 shift looks like, man, it's golden. The 1-2, probably not the most reliable data in here. And you may have some of these issues on the street. Like you can see the RPM jumps, right? So there are some traction issues here, and which is why it's acting goofy. And you may have those same issues on the street. You're going to have to figure out, work on the shifts that you can, then backtrack to the other shifts that need attention. On my car, trying to do a full throttle 1-2 shift is impossible on the street. Tires just spin. It's crazy. Once you get into the higher gears, it's going to be a little bit easier. So, how does this work then? Now, this is going to be, you're probably going to have to do a few of these pulls just due to, like, you can even see this, we got some slipping right here. We got this little jump in the RPMs. So, either way, you're going to probably have to do this a few times to get this dialed in just due to your converter slippage. Now, that's assuming you have a high stall converter. So, for that, how do you do that? So, I just use cross multiplication. You can do the same thing, it works pretty good. But basically, you're going to find a shift point on your graph that didn't meet your requirements. And so you're going to do your testing or what you observed your miles per hour to be, which in this case is 126 miles per hour. And then at what RPM did that shift occur? 6516. And all I did was if we go back to this log, I just kind of drag this until I'm trying to find the highest RPMs. And then once I find that, I lock it here. So 6516, 126. And I plug that in here. And I said, okay, well, I actually wanted to shift at 6,900 RPMs. So at this point, whether you call it cross multiplication or proportions or just, ratios, whatever, you can take 6,900 RPMs, multiply by 126, and divided by 6516, and that gives us a new target of 133 miles per hour. And so again, due to weight, due to your cam, due to your converter, due to your speed, which is wind resistance, due to your gearing, all of these things are going to take an impact or a factor that you're not just going to command whatever RPMs you want to shift at, wide open throttle. So when we come into here to these wide open tables, and if we go down to fifth and sixth, now actually my car won't ever shift into sixth gear at wide open throttle. So I've maxed that out to 318 miles an hour. Now I have, what is it, Y rated speed rating on my tires, 186 miles per hour. But, centrifugal force blows tires apart. There's no reason to be really doing wide open throttle shifting, even into fifth gear on public roads. I like going fast as the next guy, but seriously, be safe out there. I mean, have some type of common sense. Either way, but you can see now all of these shifts are at different RPMs, and that's because we need a little bit of a different lead time. So as you go through and you cross multiply, you can see 33, 58, 93. Well, what do I have over here? 33, 58, 93. So for all of these wide open shifts, as you go and cross multiply and you iron these out, you're going to have to meet up your endpoints on your normal shift tables. Your upshift fifth, upshift sixth, like all of these items, you're going to want to basically, as we go down in here, this endpoint needs to match, this is the part throttle table, needs to match where the wide open throttle begins. You want that consistency and no hiccups. And this is what you're going to need to have. So once you do that, you should be good to go. So a lot of this may seem a little bit daunting, but it's not that bad. I think you get in here and you practice a little bit, you'll get the hang of it. Not a big deal. But if you're new to it and you want a little bit of help, Bluecat back in the day wrote this tool, trans tool. It's like bctrans.exe. Check the video description. I'm going to put a link to my Google Drive as always with all kinds of tuning files and information. I'll be sure to put this in here. You can, I think it's on Camaro 5. The latest version is 1.73. So if you have something older, make sure that you upgrade. So I'm going to walk you through this a little bit. This isn't made to be an end all be all walkthrough of this, but it's something. There used to be a great video out there that went over this in depth, but again, that channel is gone. The video is gone. So I want to get you started, at least get you on the basics that you could feel comfortable using this. So when you first open it, you're going to set it to 6L80. That's what we're talking about. We have 6 gears. Our vehicle speed sensor has 36 pulses. If we look in here, you can see 36. So we're good. And then we have the gear ratios listed here. And so you can go back into trans gear ratios. And, it's pretty close. There's a few decimals off. I don't know that it's really worth sweating the details, but you can confirm and you can even edit it if you want to. The max speeds, if you hover over this stuff, you will get a tooltip display. And so this is basically saying, hey, don't change it. It's just for reference. So in my case, let's say, well, I want to shift actually at 6,900 RPMs. So I'm just going to change all of these guys. And this tool will get you in the ballpark. It's not going to be a home run, right? But it should be a really good starting point. So then it says, okay, well, what's your final gear? And again, if we look in Speedo, I have 327. I think some trucks, it's a mismatch what your actual gear is versus what HB Tuner says or the factory calibration. So beware of that. 26 and a half is my tire. My idle is 700. And then this guy, again, you can read all of that. My stall converter got 3600 stall. I don't ever lock it up until 5th gear and lock up config. Again, I have a single disc converter, so I never want to lock it at wide open throttle. So I don't know if we can disable this somehow. Um, but we're going to talk about the torque converter in a subsequent video. But the option is there to mess around with it. Now you're going to pick the car closest to you. I have a Chevy SS, which is a Holden Commodore, and the G8 is a Holden Commodore, so we're going to pick that. And now this factor and offset and up and down, this is, if you remember me talking about that S curve, this is going to be how you can dial this in with these numbers. Um, you know, I haven't really used this tool much. I used it at first and I quickly migrated away from it just because it's hard for me to see. I'd rather have like having these 2D graphs, I think is great. Maybe. Okay. Well, that totally disappeared on me. But I like being able to look at these graphs on here, and you can drag and move these things up as you want to. And it kind of helps you get dialed into kind of the zip code that you want to make this work. So I find this a little bit harder. Like, what is this doing exactly? Like, you can look here and kind of see if you are Rain Man and you can look at all these numbers and memorize them. Um, and again, hover over it. It's going to tell you a little bit. But either way, you're going to get this kind of set up how maybe you think you have an initial solution for this. At this point, now you're going to go to export and you get to the export window. And so now you have, it says main shift table. Now, each operating system is going to be a little bit different. So if I go to my upshift and then my downshift, that's 2 tables, but here it's saying it's one. So you're going to have to like copy out. If you do a copy table, it's going to do the whole thing. We don't want that. So now we do copy. We come in here and paste it, and then we'll do the downshift side. And go through there, and now we're going to hit next. And so this is 5th. And again, I have upshift 5th and I have downshift 5th are 2 different tables. So I'm going to copy this guy. I'm going to copy this guy, paste it in there. And so basically, and if you have a two column wide open, because I think some of them you have upshift and downshift next to each other. So you can format it when you get to those tables. So if we keep hitting next, you're just going to keep copying all of these things out. So there's what I'm talking about as far as a two column table, which I don't have. Maybe you do, but either way, you can do that. So you're just going to keep hitting next and copying this stuff over. And after we get through the shift scheduling and wide open, we're going to hit some of the torque converter tables. So this would be first gear, like 1 through 3, it's not locking up. And then we get to fifth gear, and this is the lock and unlock. And so, you would just go to your torque converter and come to apply release, and then you could start popping these things over. So again, be patient. We'll get to torque converters next. But I just want to, while we're talking about it, give you a rundown of this tool. So you're just going to keep hitting next and looking at whatever it's telling you up here to copy, and you're just going to move these things in. I think this is a great starting point, but ultimately your butt feel, your butt dyno is going to be a much better calibration for what's right, what feels good, what does the car want to do. It's just software. So use it as a starting point, but make sure you branch out from there. Um, I think that's the main thing that I wanted to cover today. But let's talk about a couple other things real quick. So number one, let's talk about a few other things as far as hacks. So tap up, tap down. So we have the factory says up down request is enabled. So on my car, it's a stick in the console, and you pull it down toward you to get into drive. And then it also has sport mode. And for that, you just kind of knock it over to the right and it goes into sport mode. And then from there, if you want to go into tap up, tap down, or manual shifting, then you can start rocking it back and forth. I don't really like that. I've found too many times where it's like, hey, I'm anticipating getting in a race or I'm going to go around a corner in a second. The last thing I want this transmission to do is upshift by itself. And then I need to manually command a downshift and the RPMs are going to flare and get crazy. I would just rather skip sport mode altogether. And so in my scenario, I've just disabled this here. And so now, as soon as I knock that stick over into what used to be sport mode, it's automatically tap up, tap down. And you inherit the transmission at whatever gear it's in. So if I'm cruising off a stoplight and I make it to third gear and I say, don't shift ever again until I tell you, I just flip that stick over to sport mode, which is deleted. It's now tap up, tap down. I get the transmission in manual mode in third gear. I'm ready to go full throttle or do whatever crazy shenanigans that I need to do. And I don't have to worry about commanding an up or down shift to force it to get into manual mode. I really like this. Now, as far as other hacks for the shift scheduling for tap up, tap down, if we look in the factory tune, we can see it says first gear. If you're in tap up, tap down, go ahead and make that second gear shift as soon as you hit 47 miles an hour. That is impossible with the factory gearing. You'll never hit 47 miles an hour in first. So basically, it's never going to shift by itself. Same thing for second gear. You're never going to hit 75. It's never going to automatically shift. And then same thing for 3 to 4. You cannot hit 115. So what I've done is my wide open shifting. If I come into here, let's get rid of the graph. So this is my normal wide open shifting, 33, 58, and 93 miles an hour. I've copied those over to the last 3 cells. Now I've tried this at just putting it at 100. So, like this. If I can get this guy. Well, I can't copy it because I'm in compare one. But either way, I just set the last column to 100. 100% to these values and it didn't work. So you're going to need to have it maybe I didn't try it in 2 columns, but I know for sure it works as long as the last 3 columns are set. And so this is going to save you some embarrassment and maybe some lost races. So if you have gone into manual mode and you've forgotten to upshift at redline or wherever it is, this is going to say, man, I got your back. I will shift for you. You're not going to hit the rev limiter, and the chances of you losing a race is greatly reduced. So this is a lifesaver. Put these in here, and you can see I've also done the same thing for upshift for fifth. Well, I just maxed that out. So it won't even shift into fifth at wide open throttle. Again, for safety, who needs that? So at least for the normal gears that you're always going to be in, this is a huge thing that I love doing. Now, the other thing, by the way, drives me crazy on the factory tune. If we go over here to the downshift, you'll notice, and this is, from my understanding, this is the same way on the G8s as the Chevy SS. I don't know about the Camaro Corvettes, trucks, SUVs, so on and so forth. But the 2-1 downshift was commanded at 0 miles per hour. In other words, you're in tap up, tap down, and you're slowing down to a stoplight, it will never downshift into first gear. It will downshift to second gear and stay in second gear. And then when you take off from the light, you leave it in second. Super annoying. So if you bump this up and set it to 5, now it will automatically downshift into fifth gear. So the way essentially I have this set up in general is manual mode, tap up, tap down kind of reads my mind. I put it over here, I delete sport mode. And by the way, if you're a canyon carver doing autocross or something, you probably don't want to delete sport mode. But street driving, drag racing, heck yeah, do it. I love it. So we have this sport mode deleted, and then, tap up, tap down kind of reads your mind. It's basically saying at the extremities of the throttle, it should do what it should do, which is upshift when it needs to and downshift when it needs to. I mean, you don't want to be, idling, coasting down in sixth gear and not have it downshift. That's lame because then when you go full throttle, you're not going to go anywhere. So this is a lifesaver. Highly recommend doing that as well. So make sure that you touch up all of these tables and make sure that they match. Get them where you want to. All right, so let's talk about a little bit more of an advanced topic, which is going to be optimum shift points for wide open throttle. So I've done a kind of a basic sketch here, and you can see we have the axis of time and acceleration. So as you're accelerating, assuming you never lift the throttle, this is probably what you're going to experience. A lot of acceleration, a plateau, and then underwhelming performance as you are pulling too many RPMs and you're not generating power. And so this is going to what it's going to kind of feel like. And so really, in my opinion, and there's lots of stuff out there. If you go out there and you look to find optimum shift points, they're going to have you looking at, dyno graphs and all this other kinds of stuff. And there may be some value in that. But at the end of the day, physics be physics. And you can tell when the car is pulling is the G forces. The G forces are indicating that the car is accelerating or not. And I think that's the best way to identify when is the best time to shift. So in this case, you can see third gear. I mean, our G forces are getting smaller, but guess what? They're still positive G forces. And so if I'm going to shift down into a much lower RPMs into fourth gear, I have to now build those RPMs back up to before I can even get to a break even or a match point of this. So why would I want to trade more G forces for less G forces? Not good. The opposite, you can get upside down and you can wait too long, which is, hey, third gear has petered out and now finally I can upshift. Well, you've waited too long. We don't want to do that either. The ideal scenario is we want to be even Steven with just the perfect handoff. Hey, I'm ready to give it to you. You can take over where I left off. Everything is nice and perfect. Well, how can you do that? Um, so there are a couple ways. One, everybody's got smartphones. You can get apps on your phone, like the Torque app is free. And I'm sure there's others out there that you can measure and record G forces. And you don't even need the OBD2 dongle for that, but it'll log out to a CSV file and you can see what those are doing. Now, it might be kind of hard to match those up to when a shift actually occurred, but if you did have an OBD2 dongle, you could at least get the RPMs and kind of compare from there. You can also, in HP Tuners, build your own acceleration math parameter. So I'll show you what I have. Very simple. We have the vehicle speed, in my case, miles per hour, and I'm looking back a quarter of a second. That's milliseconds, so 0.125 seconds, an eighth of a second backwards, and an eighth of a second forward. So a total of a quarter of a second, we're averaging the speed. And you can play with this number, like you could bump it up to plus or minus 1,000, which would be 1 second, which is going to give you a nice smooth swooping curve. But in this case, we're looking at a trip I did at the drag strip, and 1 second is just, it's too smooth and too perfect. So if we look in here, let's add it. Let's see what we have. So max, put in 6, decimals, we'll put in 1. Let's take a look at this. So now this is jagged line, so you're going to have to kind of manually visually filter through this. But let's take a look. We can see here we're in first gear and here we're second. So let's look at this first gear shift. So you can see that we have some funky data here going on. So we need to decide, well, is this the last valid bit of data or maybe this one? So we'll look, it's either 2.5, I'm looking over here. It's either 2.5 or 2.6. And now we need to say, okay, well, at what point did second gear take over? Did we get valid data? So about in here. So 2.3 to 2.4. So honestly, pretty impressed with myself. That's not, I mean, that's pretty close. It's not perfect. And I think in all cases, I've kind of figured out that I'm shifting way too early. And but I don't want to rev this thing out. It's four-door street car, weekend car, fun car. It's not a dedicated drag strip car, so I'm not trying to shift at 8,000 RPM. So 6,900 is plenty fine for me. Now, when we come over here, it gets a little bit fuzzier. So what is the last bit of valid data over here? Maybe 1.5, and then we come over here. Well, where's the first valid data? Maybe over here, 1.8. So not bad, pretty close. We traded 1.5 for 1.8. Not perfect. Ideally, they would be the same. But this is how you're going to kind of go through and at least get a rough idea of if you have a good shift spot. And just for kicks, we'll edit this thing. And I'll show you, if you make these numbers too big, it makes for a nice, pretty graph, but kind of hard to read. I'll just do this to force it to refresh. Mm. So there you go. So 1 second, I mean, look at that. That's nice, gorgeous data, but where did the shift occur? Like it's always going down. Like you can't really tell where the good spots are. So, but you can play with that formula and see what works for you and kind of log and see what it's like. Obviously, there's other apps like Draggy. It will give you the broad picture of everything lumped together. But as far as individual gear shifts, I don't know that Draggy's really going to help too much. But at least it does provide some type of objective data time wise of what's better or not. But still you're going to be at the mercy of whatever traction and weather are available. So it's going to be hard to compare run to run. Where G-force is G-force, you can tell in that same run, did you trade more G-forces for less or vice versa. So hopefully that'll help you get stuff dialed in for wide open throttle.